Hi everyone! In this video we're going to talk about some objects of significance, some foreshadowing, and some key things about main characters from our first reading of The Great Believers. Again, these are just things that I would point out to you as somebody with the hindsight of having read the book a couple of times if we were in person, but here we are using a video. Let's start with objects of significance. These are just things that upon rereading the book I noticed come up multiple times, so maybe something to keep an eye out for in future readings. One of them is hair. This might sound silly, but in the first couple pages, most of the time that we have a character being described, their hair is something that comes up a lot, which isn't typically done in books that I've read. But I think it's important because hair is usually seen as a sign of health and youth, right? Before maybe you're older and starting to lose hair, or if you're sick, again, you might lose hair. So I think it's important as kind of a timestamp of where the characters are in that sense. Another thing was shoes. That came up a lot, especially on page 26. And it reminded me a lot of that, old expression about walking a mile in someone else's shoes, being able to understand. And so we have this example where they're taking it quite literally, right? Their friend who passed away, borrowing their shoes, feeling like they're able to maybe see a little bit better through their eyes while walking in their shoes. We also have a lot about scarves, which doesn't necessarily come up, but the idea of cold does, and so I think scarves have to do with that. Obviously, it's this idea of warmth, extra protection around your neck, which is this really sensitive key area. And with that, like I said, the idea of the cold comes up a lot, most likely because it takes place in Chicago, which if you've ever been there, is really a prevalent part of the experience there. But I think it's also sometimes this ominous thing, right? You have this image of, maybe these, ice and cloud moving in, and maybe you don't know it yet or you can't see it, but you can feel it. And so I think it has this really good kind of symbolism for the HIV/AIDS crisis, that they can kind of feel it starting to hit them, but maybe they don't see all the effects right away yet. And then lastly, a little bit of foreshadowing. I'm not trying to spoil anything for the book with this. I'm just trying to help you become even better readers. So these are some things that are just tips to keep in mind as you read this book and any others moving forward. The first one, and I'm sorry if I ruin things for you by telling you this, is that anytime that you see a character very early on in a movie, a book, a TV show say never to something, that usually means it's going to happen, right? The more that they insist on it, the more likely that it's going to happen. I'll leave you with that. You can check the page number if you want to, but if you don't want any spoilers, don't. We also get a lot of details that are really hidden in plain sight with the foreshadowing. For example, right, we have Cecily had an 11-year-old son. And then later on, we hear that Fiona's daughter is romantically involved with somebody called Kurt Pierce. And then later she says she tracked down Cecily Pierce and see if she might talk some sense into her son. So we have these kind of details that are left there. This is kind of a cliche, but the breadcrumbs, right? You can follow the trail until you find the conclusion. And so I think it's just interesting that there's a 20-page gap or so before it's explicitly drawn out. And then a little bit about some of our main characters so far. We've got Yale. Really, he's our main character, who we follow for a lot of the time, not all of the time. And there is even some debate about whether or not he's the main character or Fiona is. But anyway, talking about Yale, he really serves mostly as a foil to those around him in one way or the other. So he, at the beginning, doesn't have so much of a distinct personality, so much as he reflects the opposite of other people's personalities. Then we have Charlie. Right away, we get strong descriptions of Charlie, really strong personality. We see that he is possessive, he is fearful, he's gregarious, right? So he's really extroverted and loving and charming and easy to be around, but then sometimes those same qualities can be a little bit more sinister at home. We have Fiona, who is somebody who's really scarred from the aftermath of the HIV/AIDS crisis in ways that we will continue to learn as the story unfolds. And we see right away, takes on a lot of personal responsibility, right? We see her, even as a teenager, being the power of attorney for other people, meaning that she can make all these life-changing decisions for them should they be incapable of making them for themselves. We see her doing that on top of nannying as a full-time job, which if you've ever done or if you have kids, you know takes a great deal of personal responsibility and attention and focus. So we just see her putting all of her energy outward, which will be a character trait that's continued throughout the book. We also see that she's really afraid of losing love, right? She seeks out that affair rather than necessarily settling with the love that she has from her husband, right? Always wanting more, afraid of losing people, afraid of losing affection. But something that was interesting to me, I'm not still totally sure what to make of it, just wanted to throw it out there for you to ponder over, is that when Claire gets lost, Fiona still gives her the advice about finding a church sanctuary, which I thought was just interesting considering all of this. We see her complicated relationship with the church throughout the book, so just something that struck me. And then, as we have mentioned, depending on what order you're watching these videos in, a really complicated relationship with her daughter that will also be really important to the book. And that's it for our characters and objects and foreshadowing. Make sure to watch the other videos and comment with any questions or other observations that you made.